What's down, people, and welcome back to another episode of Ghetto Gospel. So where we left off at, Cain just killed Abel and ain't feel no remorse about it. God cursed Cain out. Cain chunked the deuces at God and went to go live his life. So before we jump into chapter 5, it's one last thing to talk about at the end of chapter 4. So Cain started having kids, and to tell you a little bit about his family line. This person having this kid, that person was the first person to do that job, and so on, which is usually where the meanings of these names come from. Now I'm gonna pause for a second to talk about names before we move on. One of the things to realize is that at this point, people ain't know much but God and other people. So for them, names didn't mean much other than just something to call somebody else. Like when you look at them websites that tell you what names mean, somebody had to have that name first. And usually the meaning of the name either come from what that word meant originally or from some characteristic of somebody who had that name. Like if in 150 years, your grandkids noticed that a bunch of people was named Chadwick and they went to a name website and it said that the name Chadwick meant king or royalty, people who grew up during this era would already know how that name association happened. You got to realize that something happened at some point to make a name mean something. So most of these names literally just mean son of fill in the blank person or God did fill in the blank thing. Let's take Enoch for example. In chapter 5, you read all of these names and you start to see a pattern. X person was born, they had kids, and they died. Repeat with their kids. But then Enoch come along and break the pattern. It says he was born, he had kids, and then he walked with God, and God took him. I'm gonna skip over that part about God taking him because honestly, the more I dig into what the words mean, the less I understand what it means for God to take somebody. But you take the word Enoch. In Hebrew, it means dedicated. And now you can already see how the meaning of the word just come from the original person Enoch and how he lived his life. So now that we got that out the way, it's one more thing I'm gonna hit on in chapter 4. So one of Cain's great grandsons married 2 women. Apparently this was atypical because it was important enough for somebody to write down. Apparently this dude got in a scuffle with some young cat and killed him. And he proceeded to say that he's justified because if God promised to take vengeance 7 times over on whoever killed Cain, then it must apply to him even more. I know, it don't make no sense to me either, but folks be making stuff make sense in their own mind. So then it says that Eve had another son to replace Abel because Cain killed him. That son, Seth, had a kid, and then it says that people started to call on the Lord. Now that sounds all good and fine, but if you don't look at the original language, you'll miss what they're saying. As far as I can tell, what it's actually saying is that at this point, people started to abuse and misuse the name of the Lord. So what you got here in just this one chapter is the first and second murder, the first documented case of polygamy, and people starting to misuse God's name. Sound like a recipe for disaster, don't it? Well, if you thinking that, you ain't wrong. Join us for the next few weeks and we see what happened when folks decide to play with God. It ain't pretty. Other than that, I'll see y'all next week. And as always, peace, and I hope y'all people straight.